Hey everyone, this week we're covering the presidency of Ronald Reagan, one of the most important American presidents and really the president of the 1980s, as he's elected 2 terms in that decade. So let's get started. Ronald Reagan didn't have an extensive political background coming to the presidency. We really still associate him with California, where he moved as an adult, but he actually was born and raised in north central Illinois, attended Eureka College, small college in north central Illinois, and worked as a radio broadcaster after college, transitioned from that into an acting career during the 1940s into the early 50s. From there was an early example of what we would now call a motivational speaker for General Electric Company, and then entered politics in the mid-60s when he served as governor of the state of California. He had sought the Republican Party nomination for the presidency a couple times unsuccessfully, and finally got his chance when the party turned to him in 1980. His running mate was initially a challenger for the party nomination too, George H.W. Bush, and Reagan, as you read in Eric Foner's account, easily defeated Jimmy Carter, who had become an extremely unpopular president. So it's not that Reagan was well known, but the 1980 election was one that was really about change. I think in some ways you could compare it to the 1932 election when Franklin Roosevelt defeated Herbert Hoover. Roosevelt wasn't well known either, but people were voting for change because Hoover had become extremely unpopular. And this was certainly true in 1980 when Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter. I mentioned Reagan being associated with California, his adult home, and even before he was president, when he was governor of California, Reagan cultivated very much an image of the Westerner, and that became even more pronounced during his presidency, projecting an image that kind of matched his message of celebrating American rugged individualism, and also to kind of play down the fact that Reagan was 70 already when he was elected. So during his presidency, you had a lot of photographs of the type here, with Reagan wearing a Stetson, on horseback. He loved horseback riding. Pictures of him engaged in activities like chopping wood, doing chores around the ranch. You read in Eric Foner's book that in his inaugural address, Reagan used this famous phrase where he said, "Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem." And that was a big part of Reagan's appeal. He promised to restore public confidence, which had sunk during the Carter and Ford presidencies, Gerald Ford preceding Jimmy Carter, and Reagan was an effective speech maker, and phrases like this one from one of his early speeches where he said, "Our best effort and our willingness to believe in ourselves and to believe in our capacity to perform great deeds. And after all, why shouldn't we believe that? We are Americans." Reagan was an example of somebody who preached American exceptionalism, and I think his upbeat, positive, confident message was very appealing to Americans in 1980, given what Americans had been suffering with economic downturn, job loss, inflation during the 1970s. Some of the major domestic policy initiatives of the Reagan administration that I wanted to mention, one that gets very little attention but was extremely important, was a piece of legislation, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, passed in 1982. This is the first comprehensive federal government program to have a plan for the permanent disposal of radioactive nuclear waste, most of which resulted from the production of nuclear weapons. Not popular with residents of Nevada because the federal government really made Nevada the dumping ground for nuclear waste. But it's the first time that the federal government, as I said, really developed an overall plan for dealing with this issue. Reagan was always extremely proud of his nomination of Sandra Day O'Connor to the U.S. Supreme Court. She was the first woman Supreme Court justice nominated in 1981, and that was an important appointment. Ronald Reagan's position with the environment marked a change from what the Republican Party had done during Nixon's presidency, where you remember me talking about the variety of important environmental legislation that the Nixon administration passed. It's odd because as governor of California, Reagan had a very strong environmental record, but as president, he favored corporate interests over the environment. His first Secretary of the Interior was a guy named James Watt, who is really the person that developed the idea of leasing and even selling public land to corporations engaged in oil exploration, gas development, timber companies. Some of this occurred during Reagan's presidency, ran into a lot of opposition from Congress, but it's a stance that the Republican Party moved toward and has held as Reagan's successors, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, in fact, famously wanted to sell public land in order to fund public education in the United States. And the Trump administration has renewed some of these programs that had been dormant that dated back to Reagan. So the anti-environmental stance, or favoring corporate interests in development of public lands and things like state and national parks, this is something that the Republican Party has moved to really since Reagan's presidency in the 1980s. The other critically important domestic policy event during Reagan's administration that I want to talk about, Eric Foner mentions this too, was the PATCO strike. PATCO was the acronym for the union that represented the nation's air traffic controllers, who had been in negotiations for a new contract for over a year. Like all workers, they were hoping for a pay raise, but their primary concerns were safety issues. As I mentioned on this slide, air traffic controllers felt that they were working shifts with insufficient number of breaks that were simply too long, making them, in some cases, tired to the point where they argued it was unsafe to have them directing aircraft. Another element of their concerns was the fact they felt they were being asked to handle too many planes simultaneously. They were federal employees, and their decision to strike was an absolute last resort taken out of frustration with negotiations that just hadn't moved forward. Ronald Reagan took the position that because they were federal employees, they didn't have the right to strike. And when air traffic controllers went on strike, Reagan fired them. He issued a warning, and a few of them returned to work, most didn't, and so there was a scramble to try to replace them. Reagan's anti-union stance, as I mentioned here on the slide, was very popular with both conservatives and corporate America. Larger companies took this as a green light to become tougher with unions and also initiate a phenomenon that became known as downsizing. That is, reducing the size of existing workforces, but accepting the same level of production. And this was done as a way to cut costs and boost profits for shareholders. And it's interesting that Reagan's former company, General Electric, which had had record profits the year before, was one of the first to implement these measures of downsizing its workforce, and it became a reality that has persisted to the present in the American workforce. This firing of the nation's air traffic controllers was really a pivotal event in the Reagan presidency, and it's one of the clear indications of the declining power of organized labor and labor unions in 20th century America. Next, PowerPoint, we're going to look at how Reagan responds to the AIDS crisis.